The Spook Who Sat by the Door. In 1973, a small independent film called The Spook Who Sat by the Door hit theaters, and for a while, it looked like it would be another success like Sweetback's Baadasssss song. Directed by Ivan Dixon and based on Sam Greenlee's novel, the movie told the story of a black man who joins the CIA, learns all the government's secrets, and then takes that knowledge back to the streets to train young black men in guerrilla warfare. It was completely fiction, but it felt uncomfortably real at the time. America was in the middle of civil rights struggles, Vietnam War protests, and government paranoia about black liberation groups. Unlike other films of the era, The Spook Who Sat by the Door didn't show black people as victims or stereotypes. Instead, it showed them as organized, strategic, and capable of overthrowing the system. That made Hollywood nervous, but it made Washington absolutely terrified. Not long after the movie was released and started to get popular, it suddenly began to disappear. Theaters that had booked it canceled showings, and film reels were seized and destroyed. According to Sam Greenlee himself, the FBI and the CIA saw the film as a threat to national security and made sure it was pulled. For years, the film existed only in bootleg VHS copies passed from hand to hand. Hollywood executives didn't want to touch it because they knew the government had basically blacklisted it. While blaxploitation movies like Shaft and Superfly were being pushed heavily, The Spook Who Sat by the Door was treated like a no-go area. Studios wanted black films that made money without rocking the boat, not movies that could inspire real-world uprisings. Sweetback's Baadasssss song. In 1971, Melvin Van Peebles shocked Hollywood with a movie nobody thought could be made. It was called Sweetback's Baadasssss song, and it told the story of a black man who fought back against racist police and then went on the run. At the time, black characters in movies were almost always written as sidekicks, servants, or jokes, but Van Peebles refused to do that. He made a movie where a black man was not only the lead, but also someone who stood up for himself and survived. The movie looked rough, the camera work was pretty raw, and the recording style felt almost homemade. But that was exactly what made it get so popular. It didn't feel fake. It felt dangerously real, and that scared Hollywood. For the first time, a movie wasn't begging for approval from the system. It was spitting right in its face. As you'd expect, the response was fast and very hostile. The ratings board hit it with an X rating, even though it wasn't pornography, which was what that rating was usually used for. Cities all over America tried to stop theaters from showing it, saying it was too violent, too sexual, and too extreme. The FBI even kept an eye on it, worried the film might spark riots or inspire black people to fight back against police. For a lot of white audiences, it was shocking and scary. But for black audiences, it was something brand new. Here was a hero who didn't bow down, didn't beg, and didn't get killed at the end. The movie only cost a few $100,000 to make, but it made millions, proving that people really wanted stories like this. It was the one movie that showed Hollywood just how much they had ignored black viewers. But while the film made history, it also made Melvin Van Peebles a target. Hollywood studios didn't want to give him major projects after that. Bamboozled. In 2000, Spike Lee released Bamboozled, and it hit Hollywood like a slap in the face. The story was about a frustrated black TV writer who, out of anger and sarcasm, creates a modern-day minstrel show filled with racist stereotypes, blackface, and offensive jokes. Instead of failing like he hoped, the show becomes a huge success, exposing just how hungry the entertainment industry still was for racist laughs. Spike Lee basically used the film to hold up a mirror to Hollywood, showing that even after decades of progress, the industry still built profit off the pain and humiliation of black people. From the very start, the film faced a lot of controversy. Critics were split right down the middle, with some calling it a genius warning and others calling it too extreme or unwatchable. Many theaters refused to show it, and major studios didn't want to promote it. The imagery of actors in blackface was so shocking that even some audiences who agreed with Spike Lee's message couldn't sit through it. Then there was Hollywood. It treated the movie like it hated it. The movie didn't get wide distribution, and it was quickly pulled from many screens. For a film that exposed how racism was still alive in entertainment, the industry's attempt to bury it only proved Lee's point. Over the years, the movie has been quietly re-examined. Some people now call it ahead of its time, saying it predicted the way modern media still uses stereotypes for clicks, laughs, and profit. Others still avoid it, calling it too real and too painful, but that's what makes it so important. Spike Lee didn't make Bamboozled to be liked. He made it to expose an ugly truth, and Hollywood tried its absolute best to pretend it didn't exist. Even now, it isn't talked about the same way as his other classics like Do the Right Thing or Malcolm X, The Emperor Jones. In 1933, Paul Robeson became the first black actor to star in a major American film with The Emperor Jones. At first glance, it seemed like a huge step forward. Robeson was a powerful singer, actor, and activist, and the film gave him a leading role when most studios only offered black actors small, degrading parts. The story is about Brutus Jones, a Pullman porter who escapes prison, sails to the Caribbean, and uses his wits and toughness to crown himself emperor of a small island. On paper, it sounded like a really bold role for a black man, especially in the 1930s, but the way Hollywood viewed the story turned it into something a lot more troubling. The movie was filled with racist language, stereotypes, and scenes that made black audiences uncomfortable, even as it made history. Robeson himself was torn between his pride at breaking barriers and shame at the way the film distorted his image. The film quickly ran into problems with censors across the United States. Many cities straight up banned it, saying the language and themes were too offensive, while others completely cut whole scenes. Some feared it gave black people too much power on screen, while at the same time reducing that power with insulting stereotypes. It was this strange contradiction. It showed a black man as a leader, but framed him as dangerous, greedy, and doomed. Audiences in the South reacted with outrage, while civil rights groups criticized how Hollywood had once again twisted representation. For white audiences, though, the movie was a shock, simply because a black actor was actually at the center of such a big production, commanding attention in every scene. The backlash from both sides meant the film was quickly buried, and Robeson himself paid a heavy price for daring to take on roles that challenged Hollywood's limits. Song of the South. In 1946, Disney released Song of the South, and at first it looked like another family classic. It had colorful animation, live actors, and the song Zip-a-Dee-Doo-Dah, which even won an Oscar, but right under the cheerful surface was something really disturbing. The movie was set on a plantation in the South, and the black characters were shown as smiling, loyal, and happy to serve. To civil rights groups like the NAACP, it was pretty clear what Disney had done. They claimed the film gave a false, dangerous picture of America's past, one that made slavery and racism look harmless. What was supposed to be a feel-good movie suddenly became Disney's darkest mistake, but Disney refused to pull it back. The film was shown again and again in the 1950s, 60s, and even as late as the 1980s. Families kept singing the songs while protests grew louder. By the 1970s, with the civil rights movement changing the country, Song of the South looked worse than ever, so Disney quietly buried it. Unlike their other classics, it was never released on VHS or DVD in the US, but it didn't vanish completely. Disney used the film's animated characters to build Splash Mountain, which is one of the most famous rides in their theme parks. So even though the movie itself was locked away, its backstory lived on every time kids climbed onto that log ride. By the 2000s, the pressure on Disney had grown. Fans kept asking why one movie was missing from their vault. When Disney Plus launched in 2019, the truth was made clear. CEO Bob Iger admitted Song of the South would never stream because it was just too offensive. Clearly, what was once sold as a magical Disney story is now seen as a stain on the company's history. The Butler. When The Butler was released in 2013, it was supposed to be a celebration. Directed by Lee Daniels and starring Forrest Whitaker and Oprah Winfrey, the movie told the story of Cecil Gaines, a black butler who served 8 U.S. presidents in the White House, inspired by the life of Eugene Allen. It was powerful, emotional, and filled with history that many Americans had never seen on screen before. From the struggles of the civil rights movement to the quiet dignity of black workers who served a country that didn't always serve them back, the film was even praised by critics, with Whitaker and Winfrey giving unforgettable performances. But despite its success, Hollywood treated The Butler like a problem. You see, behind the scenes, there was a battle just to get the movie released. Warner Brothers fought to stop it from using the title, forcing the filmmakers to market it as Lee Daniels the Butler. And this was an unusual move that showed how studios were willing to make things harder for a black-led project, even when it had mainstream potential. The struggles didn't stop there. Major theater chains refused to give it as many screens as other big releases, and some critics accused the movie of being too political. At the same time, conservatives launched campaigns against the film because it talked about racism and inequality in America's highest office. There were even calls to boycott it because of Oprah Winfrey's outspoken views on race. For all its star power, The Butler was pushed to the margins, treated with suspicion instead of celebration. Hollywood seemed uncomfortable with a movie that placed black pain and dignity at the center of American history, especially one that dared to show presidents as flawed men rather than perfect heroes. Over time, The Butler has grown in popularity, remembered not only as a moving piece of cinema, but also as a film that Hollywood tried to hold back. Forrest Whitaker's performance was considered one of the best of his career, and Oprah Winfrey was widely praised for her emotional depth. But the Academy Awards clearly snubbed the film, and this shocked everyone, even till date. Queen and Slim hit theaters in 2019 and didn't waste any time making people uncomfortable. What started as a simple first date between two young black strangers turned into a nightmare when they were pulled over by a white police officer. Within minutes, a struggle broke out, a gun went off, and the officer was dead. The couple didn't see themselves as criminals, but they knew how America would see them, so instead of waiting to be hunted down, they ran. That decision set off one of the most talked about road stories in modern cinema. As they drove across the country, dodging police and finding shelter where they could, they accidentally became something bigger than themselves, the definition of defiance in a nation already boiling over with racial tension. There's also the fact that the movie didn't play it safe. Every scene had a lot of emotional weight. You weren't just watching two people fall in love on the run. You were literally watching the fear, exhaustion, and anger of generations being poured into one story. For some people, it was revolutionary, a modern-day Bonnie and Clyde where the criminals weren't villains, but victims of a system that was against them. For others, especially in Hollywood, it was too much, too political, too confrontational, and too willing to show America's ugliest truth without softening the blow. Some theaters cut its runs short, award voters looked the other way, and studios that normally hype up films like this went quiet. Years later, though, Queen and Slim is still remembered. In black communities, it became more than a movie. People debated whether the ending was fair, whether the couple had a chance, and why America is so quick to criminalize black survival. Younger audiences in particular loved it, passing it around like a secret classic Hollywood didn't want to celebrate. And that's the irony. The very thing that got it disliked by Hollywood is what made it so unforgettable. Nothing But a Man. In 1964, Nothing But a Man was released, and it was unlike almost anything Hollywood had shown before. The story was about Duff, a young black railroad worker in Alabama who falls in love with Josie, a preacher's daughter and schoolteacher. On the surface, it was about their romance, but really, it was about something else. It showed what it meant to be a black man trying to keep his pride and his dignity in a world designed to break him down. Most films at the time reduced black characters to jokes, background roles, or one-dimensional parts. This movie was different. It showed Duff fighting against racism at his job, struggling with unemployment, and wrestling with the responsibilities of being a partner and a father. While the storyline seemed interesting to viewers, the problem was that Hollywood didn't want this kind of honesty. Studios were used to producing films that made audiences, especially white audiences, feel comfortable. Nothing But a Man didn't do that. It put racism, inequality, and everyday humiliation on the screen without softening the edges. Many theaters in the South refused to show it at all. Distributors said it was too heavy and wouldn't make money. Critics in the mainstream press often ignored it or dismissed it as depressing. What they really meant was that it was too true, too close to the reality that America didn't want to admit to. As a result, the movie barely got shown. It was pushed aside, hidden in small, independent screenings, while other films that played it safe got the spotlight. Instead of being praised for its bravery, it was treated like a problem, something that didn't belong on the big stage. Meanwhile, civil rights leaders and activists praised it as one of the first movies that actually showed Black life with honesty and dignity. Those who managed to see it spread the word about how groundbreaking it was. Decades later, critics would look back and call it one of the most important independent films of the 20th century. The Birth of a Nation. In 1915, The Birth of a Nation was released, and it instantly became one of the most talked about films in history. It was Hollywood's first real blockbuster, running over 3 hours long and using new film techniques like cross-cutting and sweeping battle scenes. On the surface, it told the story of the Civil War and Reconstruction, but beneath the impressive camera work was a deeply racist message. The film painted black people as dangerous and foolish, while glorifying the Ku Klux Klan as heroes who saved the South. Audiences who had never seen such a grand movie experience were stunned, and many white viewers praised it as revolutionary. But the damage it caused was too much to ignore. Across the country, it stirred up old hatred, sparked violence, and gave the KKK a second life, as membership skyrocketed after the film's release. The controversy spread quickly. In cities like Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia, protests broke out in front of theaters, with civil rights groups warning that the movie was a call to violence. Some screenings turned into riots as angry crowds clashed over whether it should even be allowed on screen. As a result, several cities banned it outright, not because Hollywood wanted to, but because local leaders saw the danger. Even the NAACP fought tirelessly against it, arguing that no film should have the power to push such harmful lies to millions of people. Despite this, the movie kept playing in many parts of the country, and President Woodrow Wilson himself screened it at the White House, which gave it even more legitimacy at the time. Over the years, The Birth of a Nation became one of Hollywood's darkest secrets. It proved that movies could influence the way people thought, but it also showed how dangerous that power could be when used irresponsibly. Hearts and Dixie. When Hearts and Dixie came out in 1929, it made history as one of the first Hollywood talkies with an all-black cast. At the time, sound was still a new invention, and seeing black actors singing and speaking on screen was groundbreaking. Audiences were curious, and many praised it as a bold step forward, but there was a catch. The story was loaded with racist stereotypes. Instead of giving its cast real depth, the film portrayed black life as simple, foolish, and happy-go-lucky. The characters were written to entertain white audiences rather than reflect real black experiences. For the actors, it was one of the only chances to be in a major Hollywood production, but they had little control over how their roles were shaped. As the years rolled by, the movie became more and more embarrassing for Hollywood. By the 1940s and 50s, people began to see it for what it really was. A nostalgia for the old days when black stories were only told through harmful stereotypes. While Hollywood never officially banned it, the film was quietly pulled from circulation. Studios didn't re-release it, and it disappeared from theaters and TV. They didn't want to face the criticism that was building during the Civil War rights era, so they buried it instead. Unlike other films from that time that got restored or celebrated, Hearts and Dixie was left in the shadows, treated like a mistake no one wanted to remember, but its impact still lingers in film history. For many of the actors, appearing in Hearts and Dixie was both an achievement and a trap. It put them on screen at a time when black performers rarely got a spotlight, but it also locked them into roles that reinforced stereotypes. Today, the film is remembered not for its artistry, but for what it represents. Hollywood's willingness to use black talent without giving them real respect. Which of these movies do you think shouldn't have been banned? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, then hit the like button and share it with everyone you know who would love to see it. If you'd like more videos like this, then subscribe to our channel and hit the notification icon so you don't miss our next videos.